presents Israel's rightful claim in the Middle East and the threats we face together, featuring Dr. Jacques P. Gauthier and Frank J. Gaffney Jr. They're both brilliant spokespeople and giving a message that we all need to hear. Everybody in the country needs to hear their message. And so, without any further ado, for an overview, Frank Gaffney is going to present.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate both you all being here and Jacques' accommodation of a scheduling issue that I had. I want to sort of set the stage for what I think is going to be a most important drill down on what Israel must do and what we must help it do in a very dangerous world. My contribution to this is going to be to tell you what perhaps is obvious to you, certainly if you're following S11's superb work, which is just how dangerous that world is. For Israel, most specifically and perhaps most immediately, but no less so for us, and for that matter, for other freedom-loving people. The episode last weekend in Cairo, in which the embassy of the State of Israel was sacked, is just the most recent, and perhaps to date at least, the most vivid indicator of how seriously wrong things are going at the moment, in the Middle East specifically. My colleague Carolyn Glick has a superb piece, which you may have seen in the Jerusalem Post this weekend. It talks about the fact that that was not the first attack on the embassy. That in fact, the government of Israel, of Egypt, not only did nothing to penalize someone who clambered over the wall and tore down the Israeli flag and threw it to the ground where it was set alight by the mob, but the government of Egypt actually rewarded this individual with an apartment and signaled otherwise its support for his actions. This is a sign of what is to come even before the Muslim Brotherhood formally takes over in Egypt, which is in the offing. We've had attacks on the pipeline supplying natural gas to Israel from Egypt. We've had attacks from Sinai, nominally Egyptian-controlled territory under the Camp David Accord, against Israel, which raises the question of what does Israel do to defend itself, given that it is nominally controlled by a nominally friendly state, which of course provided the pretext for the attack on the embassy, first and second attacks on the embassy, when Israel did strike back at some of the perpetrators in Sinai. This is a bad situation, but sadly it is not the only one that Israel confronts at the moment, as you know. We've had simultaneously Recep Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, now making a tour of the Middle East, visiting Egypt yesterday, wanted to go to Gaza, not content with having tremendously exacerbated tensions through the dispatch of a Turkish-sponsored vessel and fleet to break the blockade last year. He's now saying that Turkey will provide military escorts for the future convoys to break the blockade. The blockade that, of course, no longer is a blockade because the Gaza crossing is open, again, thanks to Egypt. We have Turkey clearly ratcheting up tremendously pressure on Israel, with sanctions, with strains to its relationship, diplomatic relationship with Israel. And interestingly enough, not least, we just learned that it has changed the configuration of the identification friend or foe technology in its F-16s, US-supplied F-16s, from a setting in which Israel was identified as a friend, and therefore not susceptible to attack by those F-16s, to one in which it is not a friend. Again, straws in the wind. Lebanon. Neighboring Lebanon now in the full control of Hezbollah. Libya, now under new management, with access to, among other things, it's believed, not only surface-to-air missiles, but chemical weapons, perhaps biological weapons. When I say in the hands of these folks, let's be clear, it's Al-Qaeda, among others, that are now running things in Libya. Not exactly a frontline state, but you can bet that those arms will be in the hands of those in the front lines, threatening probably Ben Gurion, certainly Israel, and I believe others of us as well. At the very least, you can bet that Libya will be a new safe haven for terrorism aimed at the free world. Syria, I'm sure you're following developments there. We have increasingly taken the posture that the president and his administration have taken elsewhere. That will result inexorably, I think, to the demise of the Assad regime. I do not mourn its passing any more than that of Muammar Gaddafi, but beware of what comes next. It is assuredly the case that the Brotherhood will come to power there too, I think. It's even stronger in Syria than it is in Egypt. And make no mistake about it, it is determined to secure the destruction of the state of Israel. We know that not only because of what the Brotherhood has said in its own right, but of course what its Palestinian franchise, Hamas, is all about. In Gaza, and shortly in the West Bank. Then there's Iran. Iran, as you know, is involved in direct support of terrorism, both through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through its own IRGC forces, Al-Quds forces, and the like. It is very much in the business of attacking Americans, notably in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and probably in other parts of the world as well. In the past, certainly Saudi Arabia among them. And then there's the bomb. Iran is probably within months of having nuclear weapons capabilities. Nobody knows for sure. They certainly have now quantities of enriched uranium. How fast that gets uploaded into a weapon design, whether that weapon design is something that can be delivered by one of their vehicles, presumably a ballistic missile, which they have many, or more, remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, time is not on our side with respect to the Iranian nuclear program, and it's most especially not on Israel's side. Israel, of course, as you know, has been repeatedly declared to be a place that Ahmadinejad wants to wipe off the map. Which you may be less familiar with is it's not just Israel's problem. He also believes that a world without America is not only desirable but achievable. When we want to think through how a country like Iran with maybe 1 or 2 nuclear weapons, at least initially, could possibly contemplate achieving such a thing. Not just wiping Israel off the map, but bringing about a world without America, I would suggest to you it's this way. A short-range ballistic missile, not an intercontinental range, launched off of a ship off the coast of the United States with a nuclear weapon that's detonated at apogee, outside the atmosphere, would unleash a phenomenon known as electromagnetic pulse. We are on notice that that would have a catastrophic effect on the electrical grid and all of the associated infrastructures of the United States. To the effect that, according to a Blue Ribbon Commission, whose chairman, Bill Graham, described the results after a year as being one in which 9 out of 10 Americans are dead. A world truly without America. So this is a quick and very short and superficial treatment of what's in the immediate prospect for our friends in Israel and for us out of a very dynamic and dangerous environment. I just have to leave you with one relatively cheerful note, and that was we had Ariel Dodd at a lunch last week that Dan and others were present for. And his upbeat note was that if, as seems inevitable, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan falls prey to this same Arab springing, that will give rise to a Palestinian state and obviate the need for creating one out of the West Bank or Gaza. Well, that may be the good news. The bad news is that will complete the encirclement of Israel with people absolutely, unmistakably determined and I think equipped to try to finally do what they have said they would do for many years, drive the Jews into the sea. What's at stake for us in that? Well, I think everything. Not least because, of course, of our moral commitment to Israel, to its people, to the free society that it represents, to its iconic status as a nation that has suffered grievously at the hands of the so-called civilized world in the past. But it's more than that. I believe that Israel is regarded by its enemies, which are without exception our enemies, as a speed bump on the way to getting to us. Destroying the little Satan has always been seen as a necessary first step to destroying the great Satan. Moving inexorably to bring about piecemeal, if not at one fell swoop, the destruction of the Jewish state, is a very important step along the lines of trying to bring about our own destruction and that of freedom more generally. This is an explicit, God-directed obligation for those who adhere to what they call Sharia, which is a subject for perhaps another day's discourse. But I just wanted to say to you, anyone who thinks that peace can be achieved by negotiating with people who believe that Sharia not only defines any space ever occupied by Muslims as sacred space, which can never be relinquished, but more to the point, who in accordance with Sharia believe that it is their obligation to impose this program worldwide, not just in Israel, not just here, but globally. Such people are kidding themselves, deluding the rest of us, and I think greatly exacerbating the danger that I've just tried to describe in a few short words. I include in that company the President of the United States, I'm sorry to say. And it makes the work that Jacques and others, Esther and the rest of you are engaged in to try to protect Israel and thereby safeguard our own interests all the more important. I'm privileged to have been a small part of your conversation today. Thank you.